Greetings my illustrious chess friends, and I welcome you to this somewhat controversial chess video. Because in it we are going to talk about openings, chess openings. And if you peruse YouTube, there are literally thousands and thousands of chess videos dedicated to the study of chess openings. The Alekhine defense, the bird opening, the Queen's Gambit accepted, Queen's Gambit declined, Najdorf's Sicilian, Kahn's Sicilian. So many dedicated to the study of a single chess opening. And I'm going to tell you or give you a piece of advice, unsolicited I know, but it took me a number of years to learn. Studying chess openings will not make you a stronger chess player. Why? Because chess games are not won or lost in the opening phase. They are won or lost in the middle game or in the end game. Magnus Carlsen. If you look at Magnus Carlsen's games, he's the number one chess player in the world at present. And what Magnus Carlsen does is he simply gets a playable position from the opening, and he steadily outplays his opponent in the middle and in the end game. If you think of another world champion, Jose Raul Capablanca, wonderful player, notorious because he would not learn chess openings. Because he understood that chess games are not won and lost in the opening phase. They are won or lost in the middle and in the end game. And I tell you this, chess friends, for your benefit. Now, that being said, we need to be prepared when we are facing an opponent. Just by way of example, if you want to play e4, you like one e4, well, it's likely that you might face e6, you might face d6, Pirc defense. More often than not, you will likely face e5. More often than not, you will likely face the Sicilian defense, c5. You might face Caro-Kann, c6. You might face the Nimzowitsch defense, knight to c6. You might face the modern g6. You might face the Alekhine with knight to f6. You might face the Owens defense with b6. So many chess openings that you could face. And how are you likely to prepare for all of them? Well, the chances of learning opening theory for each and every one of these openings is practically negligible. So what can we do? Well, one of the best ways that I have found, and I'm passing the information on to you because it has helped me immensely, is that to have a schematic, have a scheme in mind of a pawn structure and where you are likely to place your pieces. For example, say your opponent plays the French defense. You can have a schematic based on this pawn structure here. And you can play it into the King's Indian attack just by way of example. I'm not advocating you play this way, but it provides an illustration of a scheme. And you know that you're going to fianchetto your King's Bishop. You know that this Queen's Bishop will come on d2. You know that this knight will reach its natural square on f3. You're likely to castle. And you have the plan of bolstering the centre, bringing this knight to the king's side, and pressuring the dark squares with moves like bishop to f4. The knight looks over, of course, h6 and f6, this pawn, and simply pressure these dark squares. This is your schematic for playing against the French defence, and this is your piece setup based on the pawn structure, like this. And all you need to remember is this diagram here. That's all you need to remember. You don't need to remember any theory. You don't need to remember any variations. All you need to remember is this little diagram here. And this is how you will play against the French defence. And what is great about this is that you can build an entire repertoire based around this typical pawn structure here. And all you need to do is make some adjustments with your schematic, with your scheme and your piece placements. Okay, we know that this is the pawn structure that we wish to adopt. And it becomes rather organic because around this simple structure we are going to build a repertoire that is flexible and will essentially grow with our experience. But what if instead of e6 our opponent plays e5? Can we still keep the same structure? Well, in fact, yes, we can. And we are simply going to play a setup that looks something like this. And this is our schematic. This is the ideal position that we wish to reach. And the way we do that is to play the bishop's opening. But I'm just showing you this, chess friends, because this is all you in fact need to learn. You just need to memorize this diagram here. You have your structure. In this instance, the f pawn is advanced, challenging the centre. Bishop's outside of the pawn chain, you have castled kingside. Not much to remember. It's all based upon this structure here. So the way we arrive at that, if I can just put the pieces back, is simply before e5 we play bishop's opening. And the main line is the knight challenges, and here we have our pawn structure. Of course we need to take into consideration what our opponent will do, but again we have the little schematic that we can aim for, and this is how we will play against e5. What if our opponent plays the Sicilian defence? Well, what I have done here is simply provided a schematic of piece placements based on our pawn structure of how to play against the Sicilian defence. And I think it's particularly effective because we're not playing d4, which allows the exchange of the c pawn and which gives black in many cases play down the half open c file. So we're denying him that. But this is just a little schematic based on our pawn structure. And of course we have the idea of pushing the f pawn and perhaps f5. But I highlight to you, chess friends, we have not learned any opening theory. We have not learned any opening variations. All we have before us is a schematic diagram of piece placements, which is fairly easy to learn. We fianchetto our bishop, our knight goes to c3, supporting the centre, and this is our pawn structure here. And just by way of example, dear chess friends, I thought we could take a look at a game. And this is played with the white pieces with Robert Fischer, and with the black pieces is Ozzy Geller. And Fischer begins with E4, E6, D3. Here we have the very basis which formed our very own pawn repertoire. D5, knight D2, and here you will see that Fischer reaches the ideal piece placement that we talked about, and here it is. Knight C6 was played, Rook E1 bolstering the centre and preparing to bring the knight via F1 to the king side, as we discussed earlier. Queen C7, E5. The first prelude to taking control of the dark square colour complex here. Knight went back. Queen came to support the centre, and we have what is called a pawn nail in the centre, and we'll discuss that in our videos on pawn structure. B5, H4. Taking control, of course, of the G5 square and allowing a place for this knight here to come via F1 to H3, possibly to the king side. A5, knight comes, knight D4, and here Fischer, he simply does not tolerate the presence of this knight, and he chops it with knight takes D4, C takes D, bishop F4. Knight comes to H2. Rook goes to C1 to protect this backward pawn. Bishop takes D5. Wow. A tactical shot. Pawn takes E6. And this was the idea. Fischer unleashes a discovered attack against the black queen. Queen goes to D8. And Fischer gets his piece back. And look how all of Fischer's pieces are conspiring against these dark squares. It's very, very instructive. F5, Queen H5, pawn is lost, Knight F3. Targets here on D4, and of course once again taking control of these dark squares on the king side. G6 was played. Queen H6. Well, Rook takes E6. Pinning the bishop. G takes F2 check, King takes F2, Ace takes G, Queen takes G6, Queen G7, Rook G5. And black is essentially lost, because even after something like this bishop is loose here, so many weaknesses here and here. So a wonderful game by Bobby Fischer. Of course, the interest for us is the schematic of the opening, which we have already discussed. simply achieving a setup, getting a playable position out of the opening, and trying to outplay our opponent in the middle and in the end game. And here is the schematic that we discussed here. Of course, this just illustrates how to play against the French defence, but we've already discussed how we can try to base our opening repertoire around a simple pawn structure, and how we can become flexible in meeting different replies by our opponent. Sometimes simply moving the placement of the bishop, or sometimes it's simply the placement of a knight. But essentially we keep the same kind of structure, and in this way the hope is that our opening understanding will grow and we can become better chess players, because we are not spending our time studying chess openings, but we're spending our time on the middle and on the end game. So thank you very much, chess friends, and I wish you well with your own chess.